Hello.
Good evening, Anthony, and good evening, Graham.
Hello, Charles. Are you all right?
Yeah, I am indeed. And Sunday evening, and a splendid day in the company of the Bishop of Ripon, meeting her for the first time. And we had to guess
All right.
various
Sounds
bird song.
interesting.
And there we are at a
Oh, really?
service guessing various bird song, and people not recognizing either a blue tit or a robin, the two most common birds in the country. So that was a little bit alarming.
Well, no, not really. I'm not sure the civilization of Britain rests on being able to recognize bird song. It's not one of the great qualifying factors in civilization, really.
Would like to disagree with you entirely. In the countryside, I think surely with the presence of those birds in such profusion. But anyway, so that was a glorious part of the day, and we come to an evening now, and talking, Graham, as a starting topic. Of course, you have well, both of us have taken part in being in the presence of people beyond just family and friends during this last week. We tantalized about the return of vinyl sessions in Harrogate. And did take place, I think, this week, Graham. And the topic of discussion were the
Yeah.
hidden depths of the Eagles, which have, to some extent, so hidden that they've escaped me, but you can unearth them for me right now.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was a packed room to hear the album played in full on a proper
Mm,
hi-fi
mm,
system on vinyl and to raise money for Harrogate Hospital charity.
yeah.
And they were all there to hear the record, but I did my usual Professor Pop thing and gave them some of the facts behind the album, but also what it meant. And I could see them like raise their eyebrows when I said, Hotel California album means something. It isn't just the fact it sold 32 million copies, had 3 hit singles, was number one for a long time, especially in America,
Mm,
after it was released in December 1976. I said it actually means something. And there was sort of slight silence. And I explained, well, think about like the other big selling albums of the time, the big selling acts comparable to the Eagles, like Fleetwood Mac's Rumors. Well,
yeah.
that's about failed relationships. Or
Yeah.
ABBA. Well, that's about failed
Failed
relationships. Or
relationships.
the Bee Gees. No, that's about successful relationships usually. It's usually it's more positive, the Bee Gees. Or how
No,
about
sorry, I was saying
ELO
ABBA was
out
about
the
failed
blue?
relationships, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah. But
Mm,
ELO out the blue, big seller. What did it
mm,
mean? Well, not really very much, just a bunch of fantasy. The only
yeah.
album of the time that sold huge, that had any sort of meaning, was Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. So the
Yeah.
Eagles, although some of the songs are about relationships, although they're very adult, bittersweet songs about relationships, 4 of the songs out of the 8 proper songs are about fame, America, and decadence. And it
Mm,
actually means something, especially the title track. These lyrics by Don Henley,
yeah.
who did most of it around, they actually mean something. So
Mm.
it has actually got some depth, and it's a celebration of it's both a celebration and a condemnation of the 1970s, and it's about having fame, enjoying the trappings of fame, but then knowing that this is actually really bad for you, and it's actually really shallow, and that this sort of sums up where America's going. And that's quite a heavy theme if you think about it for an album that sold 32 million
Does,
copies.
does the tradition of the American dream filter into it, do you think? Or is it actually something, if not, I'm not saying narrower in focus, but actually a more personal experience of the route to success, but through a familiar filter of rock and roll, which is a way to making massive money. Um,
Hmm.
not in a business sense, which sometimes the American dream is, or being a pioneer and an originator. I mean, the musical form was well established. So maybe actually the American dream is not necessarily a factor in all this.
No, I think it does because Don Henley's quite a cinematic storytelling type of lyricist, and the Eagles
Mm,
had all been young musicians in the 60s trying to make it. In the early 70s, they were the backing band for Linda Ronstadt, and they come from all over America to LA to try and make it. And lo and behold, they did make it quite quickly, especially in America, not so much in Britain, but in America. And they're produced by Glyn Johns, who worked with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
yeah.
And it was
Mm,
all like soft country rock and country rock ballads and gorgeous West Coast harmonies.
Mm.
But so they went through all that, and then they got bigger and bigger and more successful. And so Hotel California is like their own story of what it's like to be that successful. And it also ties in completely with the post-Watergate era, when American disillusionment with politics set in. And they themselves had obviously started to become disillusioned with the trappings of success and the
Mm.
drugs and the sex,
Mm.
and they'd been able to do exactly what he wanted because you had enough fame and money to do it.
Yeah, of
And
course.
they'd all
Mm.
stayed in these hotels. And so this is an album that they lived in. This is not them sort of like fantasizing what it'd be like or observing it in the third person. This is an album that they've lived through. In the last track, The Last Resort, by Don Henley, the lyrics again are actually about America being overrun by greed
Yeah.
and how it was founded by destroying other cultures. So it's
Yes. Mm.
bizarrely it's almost for a big selling American band. It's almost political and almost left wing. It's as an album. It's like the last hurrah for the counterculture, but it's saying goodbye to the counterculture. It's saying that the whole thing's over because by the 70s, everybody paid lip service to the counterculture, but
Mm.
most people didn't actually believe in revolution or changing the world. They just started to like believe in, freedom and liberal morality and taking drugs. And the Eagles realized all this, or Don Henley did, and realized that this was actually going nowhere. So it's a farewell album. It's a farewell to their own past. And it's a farewell to the 1960s.
What about as to why then it's, I mean, that's defining it in one sense as a very, very American album, but it transcended across to huge success in the UK. And of course, right now, as we speak, the Eagles have been playing their last
In
ever tour
Manchester.
dates in Britain. I think in
Mm,
Manchester, I think was maybe even last night, Manchester, I think possibly. So why
yeah.
do you think it transferred so well to Britain?
Well, I think it was partly the quality of the songwriting and the arrangements and the playing. First of all, is it's high quality. It's in terms of the actual songs, it's their best album.
Yeah.
It's also their most rock album in the British light rock. And on top
Mm.
of that, their influences were there's quite a lot of Beatlesque touches, especially in the guitars.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of Abbey Road in parts of some of the songs.
Mm.
In Hotel California itself, its structure is slightly Abbey Road-esque in the famous 2 and a bit minute guitar solo, the dueling guitars of Joe Walsh and Don
Yeah.
Felder.
Yeah.
That's very like the end on Abbey Road, except
Oh yes,
extended.
yeah, yeah,
So I think it's their most European album. Up
mm,
until then, they had been a very American sounding album. And I think Hotel California, although it's still American, it's
yeah.
got a lot more British and European influence than normal.
And what about if I were to throw a name like Hunter S. Thompson at it, and fear and loathing and all that, and experiencing sex and drugs and rock and roll, um, and reacting to that American experience, which of course road trips is exactly what rock and roll involves, traveling all over the place, actually checking in and out of hotels, etc. I throw in Hunter S. Thompson, maybe as a kind of loose cannon thought. Can you see any kind of connections with that?
Yeah, there is a connection, but Hunter S. Thompson was writing about the high peak of the
Yes.
counterculture and that sort of behavior that he himself
Mm.
indulged in
Yeah,
from the late
absolutely.
60s
Yeah.
onwards. And
Yeah.
he was writing about it quite early on, but he
Mm.
championed it because he looked on that lifestyle and those
Yeah.
those liberal, slightly left-wing beliefs as
Mm.
being the apex of like 20th century
Mm.
American thinking. And he never gave up on that. He
No,
even
no.
although drugs had its
Mm.
impact on him,
Mm.
even though his career sort of went a bit downhill after the 70s, he
Mm.
never he never turned his back on what he'd written
The
in
the
1971.
Gonzoid theory of life. Yeah.
He didn't look back.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
he didn't look back on it as a mistake.
No.
Whereas
Mm.
Hotel California is clearly showing up all the failings and flaws of the whole thing that Hunter S. Thompson wrote about and
Yeah.
believed in. So
Yeah.
there's a link there, but the Eagles rejected, well, rejected is too strong a word. The Eagles doubted whether it was a good lifestyle. Hunter S.
Yeah.
Thompson always thought it was a good lifestyle.
Where do you think it left the Eagles to go?
Nowhere at all. They had one more Well, they kept on losing band members. That
Yeah,
happened
exactly. Yeah.
throughout the 70s. But they only had one more original album before they split up, The Long Run,
Mm,
which was
mm,
a massive hit in America, not so much in
mm,
Britain. But it
mm.
was a more of a. It still had rock moments, but it was going back more towards their sort of country-esque roots again. So I think they couldn't. I It was as far as the Eagles could go to get to be the Beatles before the innate Americanists pulled them back from it. And
Mm.
having got to that summit, they then withdrew, then they split up, and their comebacks they've sounded more American than
Yeah.
Hotel California every time. They've never gone back to that
No.
slightly British European sound. And they still obviously are hugely successful, even though they've only got one founding member of the lineup, which is Don Henley. And the only two members who were involved around the time of Hotel California were Joe Walsh and
Yeah.
Timothy B. Schmidt, who joined after Hotel
Oh,
California.
yes, of course.
So
Yes.
there's not much of the band left.
No.
But
No.
it's amazing to think that this album, which came out in December 1976, they're still taking it around the world. It's like they've never left the hotel. They've checked in, but they haven't actually
Yeah.
checked
So
out.
they've lived up to the prophetic thought that it came up with. In terms
Exactly.
of what would happen the next, I mean, growing at that time was the punk movement, both in America, Richard Hell and the Voidoids, and of course burgeoning in this country with the Sex Pistols and the Clash and the Buzzcocks and so many more, 76 into 77. But that, whereas you could sort of see certain bands, there was a definite dismissive scorn and sneer towards, be it Barclay James Harvest or be it Yes would be one of the bands, I guess, that would be sneered at the time. But something like the Eagles actually glided away without any. There was no sense that they were in a different world from that. Whereas punk was very definitely targeting a nihilism, a demand for change, and wasn't. It didn't seem to really be about hedonism or the cost of hedonism, just hedonism, but just a need for change. And now, wanting it now.
Yeah, well, the Eagles by that point represented the old generation to the punk bands coming up in Britain. And they weren't the main
No,
representatives of that
exactly.
whole generation.
Exactly. They
And
weren't.
also,
No.
in Britain, because they'd only recently had a big hit, because their biggest hit single in Britain is Hotel California. It's
No.
their only top 10 hit. So they weren't in the fire line of punks because they
No.
weren't big enough in Britain. And also, they had no personality to attack. All Britain knew about them was the
Yeah.
gorgeous
Yeah.
country-esque West Coast harmonies
Yes.
and
Yes.
the song itself. And Hotel California is a great song, and it isn't a wimpy song, and
No. No.
it's quite a tough song, and it's also got a reggae beat, which at the time was still quite unusual for a rock act to do. And so
Yeah.
there was no reason why punks would turn on the Eagles. There was other bigger fish to attack.
Mm. Mm. Well, Graham, from life in the fast lane to my brief experience of life in the fast lane in a very different manner. If I say the word PechaKucha to you, would you have any idea whatsoever what I mean?
Did you just sneeze?
No, but so
No,
PechaKucha,
I think it. The thing is, Charles, I think it involves talking very quickly while
it
showing a
does.
slide. That's what I think it means.
Well, it's extraordinary because I don't think I mean, I'd love to know what the definition of the word PechaKucha is, but actually, you've defined it
Hmm.
perfectly. So
Wow.
this was an invitation to take part in PechaKucha talks. There's been, I think, this was the 31st such occasion in York. Now, the premise behind it is that you have 6 minutes and 40 seconds precisely to talk. I'm not saying you
Hmm.
get a cattle prod at the end that shocks you when if you fail to, if you've gone over the limit or whatever. And you have 20 images. You're right, 20 slides that go with that. And there's a theme for each one of the talks. And in this case, it was planting the seed. So there were 7 speakers. We met at a place in York called the Dough Bakehouse, which is very strong on milkshakes and caramel millionaires, whatever it's called, shortbread, shortcake, or whatever.
Linear shortbread, yeah, linear
So
shortbread.
sweet, sugary shots of joy. And so 7 different speakers on incredibly diverse subjects, it must be said. For example, an architect, a specialist in ironworks, Matthew Bruff, who is a gold medalist in learning disabled Olympics, a remarkable achievement, and how he's gone through learning disabilities and autism, but how now he looks to sort of help those in that situation to make life as absolutely the maximum possibilities that they can. There was guidelines from Paul Birch on how to do improv comedy. There was a young woman who had come to York, and now she's a writer, but she's highlighting all the writing that goes on in the city. So
Charles,
really, really diverse speakers.
Can I stop you? How does that relate to the slides?
So the way that it works is that you take the theme, and then you show slides, and they back up what you basically, they're illustrating what you're saying. So
wait a minute. Do you pick the slides, or do they pick the slides?
Each of us who does, so each speech is, so each person has 20 slides that pertain to what they're talking about. And
so it's not totally spontaneous. You have to pick the slides in advance.
It's not like, gosh, what are they going to? No, so it's not like a kind of BBC Radio 4 quiz or anything like that. It's very structured, and actually, mine seemed to be rather, I should say, primeval by comparison with the construction of some of the others, as to what technology they'd used actually to construct proper slides in as if they were doing a genuinely professional experience of presenting. So, but it was joyful in that so much information could be put into 6 minutes and 40 seconds on such diverse subjects. And I found it a really interesting and joyful experience to be involved in it.
Yeah, I still don't understand it, Charles. I still don't understand it, Charles.
So the way
I don't understand it. So each person hold on. Each person stands up and has 6.5 minutes to talk about a subject with 20 slides they've picked. Is that it? So you were planting a seed?
And so planting the seed. So I'll illustrate my example of how I did it. So I looked at how seeds were planted and what happened as a result. So I didn't make it self-indulgent, but I looked at how I became a journalist, how that came about, how I like to plant seeds as a journalist by getting people to know about what's on and to appreciate what's going on. But I also like those who plant seeds with the work that they do in the arts. So I structured it that way, and then said that at the moment we're in danger actually of bad seeds, or maybe weed killers, killing off certain things within the arts, and my concerns about that happening, and including actually the diminution of coverage of the arts in newspapers, and indeed the loss of a role like mine as an arts editor at newspapers, which is
Charles, this sounds interesting, but you could have done that without the slides. What's the point of the slides?
The slides are really useful, because in my case it was to show the very, actually it was the second play I ever was in as a child. Then I showed one from my days in Cardiff Candlewitz when I performed at the Edinburgh Fringe. So I used them as illustrations. There was one for Geoffrey Boycott when I was talking about being the first 11 cricket scorer, but I went from wanting to be Jeff Boycott to wanting to write about Jeff Boycott, and then to wanting to be an arts journalist. So that's how I used the slides. I also, for example, I did a picture of good seeds, which happened to just be the bird seeds, a close-up of the bird seeds. And then as a kind of punning joke for bad seeds, I found an album sleeve by Nick Cave and the bad seeds.
That's good.
So that's the kind of thing that one did. I illustrated neat handwriting just by writing neat handwriting as a slide. I then talked about various people who I really admired from the York art scene, from Damien Cruden to John Cooper to Alex Wright and Phil Granger, through the years, and in particular Simon Thackeray at the Shed, the extraordinary work that he did, so out of the box. And I talked about that, how that's what's so important, the use of the independence, the difference that they make, not through having backing from city councils or whatever, but actually being visionaries in their own right, and what that brings to York. So that the way they
but Charles,
Graham.
But Charles, is there any audience interaction?
So the audience interaction is twofold. One, they may just respond within, and if they find something amusing, they might laugh. They're not invited to do questions during it, nor are they invited to get in the way of it, as it were. It has to flow, but you can all meet up afterwards and chat about it. So that's the way that it works. I mean, it is a presentation.
So the whole point is to bring people together. So the whole point is to bring people together from different disciplines and backgrounds who wouldn't normally talk at the same time.
Correct.
And to make sure none of them can be boring, because they only get 6.5 minutes each, and they have to have a visual aspect which prompts them,
which prompts what they're saying.
Yeah,
absolutely right, Graham.
And I get it. It sounds vaguely good.
I think. I mean, I have to hold my hands up and say I'd never been to one before. And of course, it's being too big, one big ego. I obviously was delighted to go and talk about things that I've done and things that I like being done or whatever. But I think it's an interesting discipline as well to structure something in 6 minutes 40 seconds. At one point I got as many as 2 pictures behind, so I really had to chase after myself because I mean how many words do you think might be in every 20 seconds? How many words might you talk in 20 seconds?
100.
Well, that would be going on for approximately maybe 14 minutes.
Yeah.
Not 6 minutes 40.
You can
so
a lot in 6.5 minutes, Charles. It sounds to me like an ideas jukebox.
It is an ideas jukebox. I like that. Well, when one looked it up, the answer technically that they came up was 33. But I spoke with Alex Wright, who'd done it before, and he said, well, probably between more like 48 to 55 or whatever. So I went rather more with what Alex suggested, and I did find that with my love of words, I'd rather loved too many words. So maybe
I'm not surprised.
Actually, the advice to just do 33 words per slide would be sensible, because it probably would help with the rhythm of it. But that's only the kind of thing that you find out having done it. But this was, as I say, was part of the York Festival
sounds
of
like
Ideas.
It suit me, because I would just get to the point, then I get to the point, then I get to the point,
you get to the point.
Then I get to the point.
I think, Graham, you should put yourself forward to do one. I think you'd really enjoy it. And obviously you have to respond to the theme that's there. But that's why, again, it was interesting, because everyone found their ways to reflect on what planting the seed meant to them. And in
so is this a regular event in York?
Say again, Graham.
Is this a regular? Event in York?
It is. So they've done, as I say, 31 so far. It's not. I don't. It's not every month, but actually, recently, I think I was offered the chance to do it originally in May and couldn't, and so June came up. So maybe they have some periods when it's done quite regularly within the city. It's also involved with an organisation in York called This Is York, which is to add to so many other organisations in York, like Made It York, or York Bid, or whatever. So it's a confusing world in York as to how many people are pushing York. But I thought it was a really, really worthwhile project. And what I loved about it was one of those ones where, again, the audience was very diverse as well. And just also being in a building like that, which is obviously best known for being a place to get replenished with gloriously sweet flavors, but to have a place like that putting on an event for the Festival of Ideas, which again takes it out of the university context, puts it in the city. So there was a lot to recommend it about it as an event.
I tell you what, Charles, I think they could apply this to the general election, because if we have to watch one more debate with the candidates, if all the candidates in the British general election were forced just to do 6.5 minutes to 20 slides, it'd be much more interesting.
Well, the thing is, I mean, we're going off subject there. What I find extraordinary is I think the first talk they were told to be restricted to 45 seconds, but in those 45 seconds, they kept interrupting each other, so you couldn't actually do 45 seconds. Why are they not? And there's a simple question, this, Graham. Why are they not turning off the other person's microphone when the person who's supposed to be speaking is speaking?
I thought the same thing. I've watched 2 debates on different channels, and both times the adjudicator did not marshal and control the candidates properly.
Correct.
They let them overrun, they let them interrupt, and it was almost like it's more entertaining if we let them misbehave than if we actually make them follow the format properly. That's the gut feeling I got, and I thought it sort of ruined them as sensible debates. They degenerate the whole time into the sort of politics the media always say they don't want. But in fact, you know what the media is like? It does want that. Even though it doesn't. I think it probably liked. It wants rudeness.
Yeah, it liked mordant locking horns with Raynor, and I'm sure you're right, Graham.
Well, she was just damn rude. I mean, and it was like they were both like public school debating societies where the rudest people tried to build their way through the actual debate.
So what? Okay, so I rather like your alternative. So they could do a PechaKucha talk, each of them. What a excellent.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's
20 slides.
Yeah.
It worked.
Good. Now, Graham, next topic. Well, let's have an interruption, and then we'll probably have our last major topic of the evening.
Do you remember that film Naked Gun 2.5? That comedy with Leslie Nielsen that came out
about 1991? Who can forget that?
Yeah. Well, you know, it started off with a joke about pretentious filmmaking. It started off,
It did.
the
It
credits on
did.
the screen said, unfilmed Jerry Zucker. Now, since this is just a really silly comedy, to have like unfilmed Jerry Zucker was just hilarious. Well, I saw a film today, a new film that's just come out at the Everyman in Harrogate, which deserved to be treated like that because it's a film by Viggo Mortensen, the absolutely fantastic actor. How
Yep.
many great films
Oh,
has he been in?
absolutely.
How
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
how many great performances? But sadly, he's been given his own film where he not only stars in the film, he
Mm.
not only directs the film, he also wrote the script and he wrote the musical score and plays on the musical score. So it's literally unfilmed Viggo Mortensen, and it's called "The Dead Don't Hurt," which sounds like
And
a sort of spoof title. It sounds like Naked Gun and a Half, the follow up. The Dead Don't Hurt, and I should have known from the title this was going to go wrong, and it did go wrong because it's one of those films where if you turned the sound and dialogue down, it
mm,
looked great. You could tell they were good actors. You could tell it was well directed. It was very sort of like well put together. But when you actually listened to the dialogue and understood the characters, you realized it was just completely two dimensional and pretentious. So you can't actually
oh
say it was
dear.
a bad film, but there was something dreadful about it. It was one of those films that thinks it's much better than it actually is.
Yes. What about the music, Graham?
The music was fine. In fact, I'd say that the best thing about the whole thing, apart from the fact it looked good, was the
Mm,
music. The music totally worked, but it kept on trying to be enigmatic. But it wasn't enigmatic, it was just empty. The characters were two dimensional, apart from the lead female actor who played Vigo's wife. This is set during the Civil War, although you don't actually see the Civil War. And she was fantastic, but it was like she was in the wrong film. All the rest of
ah,
them were so two dimensional. There was
yeah.
nothing below the surface. There was no little details in how they behaved. There was no details in the set design. There was no ideas that were below what the dialogue was saying. What you heard was what you got. But the film kept on acting like it was a really big, important film. And so it just didn't work with the script. The script just didn't have enough richness and sort of like depth to it to deserve that sort of treatment in it. So it just came across as pretentious.
Was it trying to be European art house?
It was like Scandi noir applied to the Wild West, but not as good as that sounds.
That sounds great. That sounds like
It
a
doesn't.
miss.
No, honestly, it's not as good as that.
No, but no, exactly. I'm saying I think
Yeah.
that's where that's where Vigo went wrong. That's
Well,
clearly
well, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen that Woody Allen comedy Love and Death from 1974. And
absolutely
in the film, he sort of takes the make out of Ingrid Bergman's films, or
yes.
Ingmar Bergman's films rather, and so in sort of art house films. And there's a bit in the film where Woody goes, because it's set in Russia, he goes
Mm.
wheat, wheat, and more wheat, and it's like because he's like staying off at the distance, wheat, wheat, and more wheat. And at the end of, I won't give the plot away, but at the end of The Dead Don't Hurt, Viggo
Mm.
Mortensen turns to his little son and says, "Water and more water." It's like, I nearly burst out laughing. So it's misplaced talent. It's the film sadly is a work of talent that misfires because he
Mm.
hasn't thought through the script enough in terms of the characterization.
Graham, from you touched upon water there, so let's touch upon water briefly before we go to your final topic. Moby Dick. Um,
Mm.
do you think Moby Dick is pretty well impossible to stage, despite the fact I've seen it quite often on stage?
Well, as you know better than I do, because you're much more of a theatre buff than I am,
Mm.
the key to doing theatre is to boil whatever the source material is down to the bits that work best theatrically. If you try and reproduce a book or a film, even vaguely faithfully on stage,
Mm.
it's usually going a bit wrong. You have to like really change it quite a bit and edit it the hell out of it to make it work.
Mm.
So I think there's no book you can't make it a successful
No.
stage adaptation. But the more you try to be faithful to the book, the more I think it would come a cropper on stage.
Mm. I mean, John Huston, famous film version of it. Gregory Peck, was it Gregory Peck and Orson Welles? I think.
That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah, yeah. He's the one that ended up in the mouth of the whale.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we didn't,
No, I'm laughing.
so that's exactly the kind of thing we didn't have in this version. Now, it's interesting because you've got to look for the strengths of theatre as to why you're doing it as a theatrical piece. And I mean, it was very interesting to interview Sebastian Armesto, who wrote the script for the company. It was called Simple Eight, and they worked in tandem with the Royal and Derngate from Northampton, with Jesse Jones, the artistic director there, directing it. Of course, one of the things you're up against with Moby Dick is that you don't. Moby Dick, as has been pointed out, really only actually the clash at the spoiler alert, the crucial clash with Moby Dick the whale only happens in the last few pages. So I think the way that Sebastian tried to get around this was to look at it from the point of view of imagination and describing about a whale, capturing the awe that we feel towards whale, the massiveness of whales, the why people hunt them, but also just the magnificence of the whale, all of which has to be is done essentially here through description and through conversation. There is a moment where the bones, there are whale bones that structure the head of a whale. So there is a moment that is done. The only puppet in the piece is one of a porpoise, and I'm not saying there should be a structure of a whale on stage, but it's always an interesting thing as to how you represent that. I think it has to get inside your head as much as it gets inside the head of Captain Ahab, of course, who has this vendetta, having lost his leg to Moby Dick, but also Ishmael, the young schoolmaster, who is the narrator of the piece. And one other interesting concept came into it, which was that when Sebastian first wrote it 2010, first directed it in 2013 himself, since then, of course, since he's renewed it, we've had COVID, and he said, actually, the sense of an unseen threat is something that we're now only too aware of ourselves. So the post-pandemic context in which we watch this should have an influence on it. And I can see that. I mean, it was described in the preview as being fun, joyous, and fast moving. It wasn't fun. It wasn't joyous. It's never been fun. It's never been joyous. It's not meant to be. It was fast moving in the first half, but went into a lull in the second before a really, really strong ending.
In the doldrums.
I just wonder if it's one of those ones that is really, really difficult to do as a piece of theatre.
It's all about judgment, isn't it? It's like the decisions you make. It's a bit like MasterChef. If you pick the wrong recipe to make, it's going to go hideously wrong, even if you're actually a good chef. So, Moby Dick, there's no reason why it can't be a great play, but if you make the wrong artistic decisions, it is going to go wrong. But you basically saying, Charles, you saying that this play about a whale, that COVID is the elephant in the room?
That's very good, Graham. I quite like that. Maybe it's just a whale in the room. But I like that. But I like that thought. I actually thought it's one of those productions where the concept worked, I think, better than what we saw. So I summed it up in the review saying it wasn't a whale of a time, but it was a deep dive into Moby Dick. I know that's a bit of a cliched way of putting it, but that's actually what it was. So ultimately, I felt a bit frustrated by it, if I'm honest. Not because I didn't see a whale. I wasn't expecting that. I think maybe just ideas that didn't quite come together. They used sea shanties. You got that sense of the cast mirroring a whaling crew in the hard work that they were doing. They were doing everything themselves, moving the scenery, etc. But just didn't quite happen. Now, so
it's not going to be a new wave then of plays.
Graham, love it. I didn't see that one coming. Anyway, Graham, it's a bit of a tight squeeze, your last subject, but we'll pick out, maybe just concentrate on one album. This is bands that Charm, which you run, the Charm gigs, raved about many years ago, who never made it big, but just kept on going to the present day. Maybe let's focus on one band that's the case of, because it's always reassuring actually when that happens, that bands persist.
Well, yeah,
what made them stand out to you, because bears fruit.
The band Percy, who are from the York area, I first wrote about my Charm magazine about 1998 and 1999. Well, I hadn't seen them play live for 25 years because, I stopped the Charm magazine after 4 years and blah, blah, blah. And I was surprised to see they were still going. And the album called New Phase. And at the time, I really liked them a lot because there's this single called Donny Rednecks about a band playing in a terrible Doncaster pub full of redneck people, and the song's not only a great punk song with great lyrics, because the lyricist Colin Howard writes really sharp lyrics,
Yeah.
but also the single itself disintegrates into chaos, so the band becomes the chaos of the pub. So it's a brilliant song. And Steve Lamacq, when he was at Radio 1 at the time, loved Percy and raved about them, and John Peel liked him. And they were on Mook Records. Mook Records, this great indie label in Leeds. So I used to write a lot about Percy. I really liked him, but I hadn't seen him for 2.5 years. And lo and behold, they turn up at the Den, a sports bar in Harrogate, to promote the new album because of Alex from Harrogate band Hellfire Jack. And Alex does a great job of booking bands at the Den. So I thought, well, I've got to go and see them. So I went to see them, not expecting much after 25 years, although the lineup's the same: Colin Howard, Andy Wiles, Paula Duck. Only the drummer's different because they used to have Hugh Whitaker, who was in the House Martins. But when I met Hugh in the band years ago, he'd been let out of jail after hitting someone with an axe in a car park in a dispute. So it was quite strange actually meeting the bloke. And he's not in the band anymore, but the rest of them are. And they were brilliant. They were just unbelievably good. They were still sharp, still melodic, still full of energy. You wouldn't think like they've been going for like more than 25 years. And the new album, New Phase, I mean, it's got songs like Sink Estate, Satanic Rites. I mean, what a great title.
It's a great title.
Do You Think I'm on the Spectrum? Last Train to Selby, which is a great track. Greedy People. It's not the money, it's the principle, sings Colin. I Can Hear Orgies, which is about people having sex in the apartment two floors down. so it's got humor and bite. And if you said to me this album came out in 1996, I'd say, yeah, obviously it did, yeah, because it sounds like a young band.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.